Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good morning. Welcome to the open door. We hope to be open to the Spirit, open to the teaching of the Church, and open to our listeners. And our listeners are invited to call, and if you can't call, we hope you continue to listen and to mull over what we are discussing today. I'm also delighted to welcome back Dr. Rhonda Shervin, a Catholic philosopher, writer, and evangelist. And I'd like to welcome as well William Ed Rushman, who is joining us from a mobile unit of sorts. So sometimes you'll be hearing him and sometimes you won't. Our agenda for today is threefold. We have worked through the entire Solidarity Party platform. So one of the things I'd like to do this morning is to revisit the short preamble, and then I'd like to look at a sampler, just 3 items from various planks that we've considered. But I'd like to begin, if Ed is with us, I'd like to begin with a discussion of some of the practical issues that 2 members of the American Solidarity Party are dealing with as candidates for public office in California. Our candidate for governor is delighted because, while he can't be here, his wife has given birth to their 8th child just yesterday. But we send him our congratulations and look forward to his return. Now, Ed Rushman, are you there, Ed?
I am still here.
He's there. All right. Ed, maybe you could begin by telling us how some of the practicalities are working out or not working out in your run for the Congress.
Sure, thanks. It's funny. The first thing is that because I'm not going in under a Democrat or Republican support, naturally there's no funding. But more than that, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And the Democratic and Republican parties provide a means for making the contacts and getting the message out. It's not just the money, it's all the contacts all over the place. And that's one of the main obstacles for me. And I think it's very fitting, we were talking a little before the top of the hour about despair, and thinking about that and praying that people would be able to overcome that. I think there's a despair that makes it so that people are less likely to embrace a third-party candidate. So the biggest obstacle for me right now is getting the word out and getting people to spread it through social media, getting it out, without spending millions of dollars on billboards. And in fact, I think that money would be wasted because my own mother-in-law says, there's no way I'm going to vote for a third-party candidate because it's a wasted vote. So,
a low blow.
It is. I'm having a hard time just getting her to go for it. My friends and family, of course, and the American Solidarity Party community have been very, very supportive. But nevertheless, that's one of the things is getting people to move, to fight that inertia, and an inertia is rooted partly in our natural tendency for stability. We don't like, strangely enough, we crave change and we don't want change. We want things to be better, but we also want to be comfortable. And so for people to take the risk, and you say, well, what risk do they have? I've posted this and said, just share this, repost it out. That's all you have to do. And then one person does it. out of the 40 that I might appeal to. And I think part of the reason for that is it's partly despair, and the other thing is we're not willing to suffer the embarrassment. If we repost something, if we share something out for a third-party candidate, there's two things. One is our friends may not agree. They may say, why are you doing this? It's kind of, this isn't you. This is strange that you would be promoting a candidate. And the second thing is, in light of what's going on in the news right now, we're afraid that that person that we're supporting will disappoint us. I mean, how many times have we found somebody had feet of clay? It's funny because this was just in the readings a few days ago in the book of Daniel. You know, so often we bet on someone or we bet on something and we say, this will bring something good or this will make me happy. And then when we do that, we find out, no, it won't. We're disappointed, and we don't want to look like fools. So I think these are. I mean, there's just a ton of things to talk about, but those are things that I think about right away. That we're afraid that the thing that we're promoting won't work. We're afraid to look foolish to friends, and we're lost in our own despair and hopelessness that the country is beyond fixing. You know, what can one person do? What can my vote do? That kind of thing. So that's kind of like my little opening for it, and I look forward to what you folks think of that.
Ed's heard me before. Rhonda, what do you think about that?
Well, what you say helped me a lot because actually, see, it happens that I know a tiny bit about political philosophy, almost nothing about politics, don't follow it. I just vote for whoever's pro-life because I wish that in Hitler's Germany, the bishops would tell people, vote for one issue, this man is a terrorist, and forget about the depression. So I think one issue could be very good, which is my pro-life issue. So I just vote along those lines. So I know nothing about all these procedures. But you're explaining why I'm so hesitant to put even more energy into it, even though I joined the party when Jim introduced me to it, because I agree with everything on the platform. So, you know, it seemed to me a wonderful thing, but I'm hesitant because of this, especially this issue. It's a lost vote. Like it seems to me, from listening to these programs for the last, 3 months, that
We've been going at it.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between the people who came to this party from the Republican side or from the Democratic side. So I'm coming to it from the Republican side and happen to like Trump very much for a funny reason, which Jim will understand very well, Jim Hanna, because he knew him, is he happens to have certain personality traits my husband, who died 20 years ago, had, which endeared me to him. So anyway, coming from the Trump side, I wouldn't have liked people to vote, so many people to vote for a third party that Hillary got in. So I think that's not just a, there's something to it that we have to address. So you're trying to address that, I think, and I'm happy you are.
All right. Now, Ed, I'm going to ask you to shift from our acute national malaise to some number crunching. You have to do both. Tell us how many people are in your district, roughly.
So the number of people in a district, of course, just as and I'm sorry to state the obvious, but is fixed roughly because we have a fixed number of representatives in Congress at 435. So we take the population, divide it by 435, and that sets the size of the district. I'm sorry to be the obvious one, but that's the way it works. So here, what will happen is that there will be population growth, and they'll do redistricting over time. It so happens that I believe it's right around 720,000 right now. Now, if we take that breakdown, though, there's a lot of people that are not eligible to vote in that. There's people that are very young. Not everybody in the district is going to be a citizen. We have a fair number of non-citizens that are here under either work permits or that are undocumented here. We've got, then on top of that, there's the folks that simply will not vote. And those are for a number of reasons. It could be infirmity. It could be any number of things. Sometimes it's just a choice. So what I've done is I've taken, because I do this for a living, not politics, but I work with numbers for a living and manage, and I do a lot of things which some of you are aware of already.
You deal with a crisis a day.
Yes, pretty much, or multiple. I have one I'm going into today that I've got to make a major decision that's going to affect potentially millions of people, and it's driving me crazy thinking about it. But the point is, I figure that there's about half of those that I'm going to focus on. I'm going to consider that my market is about 350,000 people. And then I look at how the 2016 election went, and I see in there that in the primary, it was relatively fragmented because the incumbent, who had been in office for more than a decade, was running for senator and was not in the race. So we had a number of people that were running, mostly Democrats. It's a top two primary, so most of them were Democrats. There was one Republican. The top one won the primary, or came out number one in the primary, with about 60,000 votes. And each of the second, third, and fourth place came in with less than a third, or about a third of that each. So this was a very strong showing. He's an excellent campaigner. He's somebody that knows how to leverage his incumbency to win. He was in the state legislature for a couple of decades, I think. He's an investment banker, but he, nevertheless, the people weren't bothered by that. He managed to get in. He now uses taxpayer dollars to put out mailings that are essentially campaign under the guise of offering services. And at some point, someday, I would like to talk about the Congress member, the representative, as a form of patronage rather than a form of representation, because that's the model that we've slipped into. But that's a topic for another day. But in terms of numbers, he won the general election running against another Democrat. Because it's top two, and because this is California, it's very unlikely we'll ever have a Republican running in a general election, except in a district that has been gerrymandered essentially by the Democrats, so that Republicans are granted one district so that the Democrats can take four. I mean, that's really the way it works. And by the way, our district is the definition of gerrymandering almost. It looks a mess. It looks like an insane puzzle piece because they've worked it out so this would be this district is rated a solid Democratic district. No one but a Democrat can occupy it. Anyway, number-wise, he won with 90,000 votes in the general election. So what this means is that when I've crunched it all down, I figured that through my social media, I need to have about 70,000. That's 7 with 4 zeros, not 17. 70,000 likes on the Facebook and on any other social media, so that I have, because obviously those won't all convert to votes. So that's a number that I feel I need to have that says I have enough attention to have some hope of garnering the necessary votes in the primary. And I should add that we'll lose about a quarter to a third of our voters in this primary because it's a midterm election. We won't get the same turnout we do on the other years.
Yes.
So, Jim, is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yes, and I want to get one more statistic out of you, Ed. What would it cost to send one modest mailer to the constituents?
If I just do a postcard, and Jim, I think small on things like this, because I really hate the idea of money in politics, and you know that I didn't want to run this with any funding at all. I mean, I just didn't want to do any fundraising. But my rough estimate was about $75,000 to send a postcard. And that's sending it out to 350,000 people. And by the way, I should also mention, when I do estimates or anything else, I can be off by 15, 20%. It's magnitudes I'm concerned with, and that puts this into the right ballpark. So the real number, because I got to buy postcards, and depending on how I get them printed, and depending on how I get help with getting them addressed and all that, it could run as high as 100,000. And that's to get one ignored postcard out to a significant number of people.
That hurts.
It does hurt.
But what do you make of the national committee of the American Solidarity Party that's already amassed a treasury of $16,000?
And this is the problem, is that it's very, very hard to resist. And let me take this just while we're in this numbers thing and everything else, let me take this in a little bit different way.
Fine.
If we look at a campaign as a business, and I know that sounds like, well, no, of course that's the way it is, but not everybody realizes that politics in the United States is a business. There are thousands of people making significant livings off the Democratic, especially off the Democratic. They're a big employer, and off the Republican Party. These are huge, huge de facto corporations that have national operations, they have state operations, they have local operations. The Democratic Party in particular is the Google of politics. They've got all the data. They have access to all the data because folks in the IT world tend to lean toward the left. So they have access to every piece of information about every American that's online in the United States. I mean, think about what an advantage that really is. And the American Solidarity Party or any independent candidate is like, they are like some little podunk operation that's got an absolutely wonderful product, and as soon as that product ever gets anything like any attention or any significant user base, then what's going to happen? There's going to be an attempt at acquisition. This is one of the risks, and I'm a strategist among other things, and I always look for where is the risk. And the problem is that when you're in this small group, you have to decide, are you going to let yourself be acquired and get some reward? Then leaders can get some reward, members maybe can find a way to get some reward. Or do you hold out and say, I'm going to continue the good fight, I'm going to continue to build my customer base, I'm going to continue to try along this path that I have chosen against this behemoth, against this juggernaut, this huge monster that no one can beat, and that is funded with literally billions of dollars. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Hillary alone had $1 billion fund for the presidency.
Listen, I just want to say, Rhonda, and somebody has joined us, somebody whose phone number begins 815.
Yeah, that's me. It's John Green. Sorry I'm coming in late here.
I'm sorry, could you tell us again, sir?
This is John Breen. I'm sorry for calling in late here.
This is John Breen. And John Breen merits an apology from me because the last time we ran the show, I had someone on who's a great sort of someone, but who just took off. And I forgot to ask John what he had to say about what was being said. So, John, I want to apologize to you. And what we've had so far here is Rhonda beginning with a prayer saying that we ought not to be discouraged. We had that prayer before we began. And now we've been listening to Ed Rushman, who's running for Congress out of Orange County, who's given us a number of reasons to be discouraged. However, he is not discouraged, and there's no reason why we should be discouraged. I want to add two things to what Ed said. He was speaking about the Democratic Party and parties in general, political parties in general, being akin to corporations. And I want to say that that's what higher education is today. It's really a corporate model sort of endeavor. And those of us who have been involved in it recognize it. And I think John is an online student with Holy Apostles College and Seminary, and I think he's escaped, I bet he's escaped the flavor of for-profit, non-profit entities. The other thing I wanted to say, Ed, in terms of successes being bought up and how if we do something right with the American Solidarity Party, there's going to be somebody wanting to gobble us up. This is a story, it's a true story, it's to be understood as something to, well, gee, St. Thomas always said anything that's taught is received according to the mode of the one who's being taught. One of my mixed heroes in the Catholic worker movement was a fellow named Ammon Hennessy. And Ammon was, once upon a time, he was always called the one-man revolution. He was picketing the World's Fair in Seattle. And someone came up to him and he said, Ammon, you're not going to change the world. What are you picketing the World's Fair for? And Ammon said, probably not, but it sure as hell isn't going to change me. That's the end of the anecdote.
Very good.
So we're here to stay. I think the American Solidarity Party is here to stay. The idea is, I think, an extraordinarily important one, and I'm sure we'll undergo many, many growth pains and suffer from splinters, externally introduced and internally produced, but I think we're here to stay. Rhonda, it's your turn again.
Well, now, I listening to this whole thing about the problem of even sending out postcards costing more than you probably have, advertising things, wouldn't you be trying to get lists from online where you just press one group button and 1,000 people get the ad?
Yes, and even the cost of those is really, really high when you get to the numbers. And to be honest with you, I can't remember what it was. I have it in my campaign documentation that I'm keeping, where I have all my estimates and my current situation analysis and all that. It's still pretty high because 350,000 people. Let me think a minute. I just sent something out to a test one. I'm doing a kind of a test market right now. That one was to 1,500 people, I believe, and that was $10. So, $10 to 1,500, that puts us at 100 to 17,000, or 15,000, 1,000 to 150,000. So that puts us into many thousands of dollars to send out.
Yes, but at least it's possibly doable. But yeah.
And by the way, this is not to be discouraging. I guess I should point this out because it's obvious to me. It may not be obvious to everybody because this is the first time you're hearing me. I think I talk to myself all the time.
I have relatives who do that.
The idea, did they ever get out of the institution? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, they're on home leave.
What about having everyone you know stand in the wall and hand out flyers?
And so there's all these things that can be done, and in my line of work,
that costs much less. So what you have to do is print up the flyers, which cost money, and then send out every friend and tell them, if you're my friend, you're going to do this.
We could have flash mobs.
The inner totalitarian speaking.
But this is exactly the point, and it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. But what I want to do is just stop for a moment and say, in everything that I do in change, one of my jobs is change agent. And in making change, the thing that I found that I do differently from most people in business is that I assess the current situation dispassionately. I simply look at what it is. And the way that things are, with the power of the main parties, with the cost of getting the word out and everything else, that is simply the way it is. And our response to that is either discouragement and despair, or another completely valid response is to say, what can we do? And that's exactly where you're going, Rhonda, is you're saying, okay, what can you do? Let's keep exploring the possibilities. And in doing that, I really think the hope is in motivating people to spread the word at zero cost or near zero cost. Exactly what you're saying. Maybe not predicating it upon friendship or predicating friendship upon action, but the idea is to say the only way this is going to happen is if people will spread the word, overcome their inertia, overcome their despair, and say, I am going to express hope by doing this. And I think that that's the key. I think there's two keys to doing this. One is to acknowledge the hopelessness and then to express hope despite it. And I think that's a very human thing to do. If you look at people that have been through really horrible situations, there's that indomitable spirit, that human spirit that we see again and again overcomes impossible odds. And humans are fantastic at hunkering down and surviving the unsurvivable. We're fantastic at that. There are people that live up in Alaska, natives, Inuit out there that live in what I would consider impossible conditions. We spread all over the world and we live in very inhospitable environments. Life finds a way, to quote Jurassic Park. We find a way to do this, and it's just a matter of tapping into that hope, tapping into that desire for something better that will get people to take action. And I think that our zero-cost action has to be where the focus is, and that's what I'm trying to do. But I haven't yet unlocked...
Oh, okay. I just got it. The Holy Spirit just zapped me. What you need to do is like the Catholic Evidence Guild. You need to stand up on the top of your car in the mall, in the shopping mall, and you have a beautiful speaking voice, and start speaking.
Plus, Roddy, you don't know this, but Ed is a rock climber, and standing on top of his car is not going to be difficult for him.
No, I'm serious. That would really work.
I'm serious too.
Of course, you have big signs and you have flyers that you pass out.
But I shift gears for a minute. John Green, you joined us a little bit late, but you're a student, and I'm pretty sure you're in a different generation from us, even from Ed, who's geez, I guess he's just what you'd call a middle age, just barely. But John, what do you think about hope and politics and being relatively young? How does it all go together for you?
Well, excuse me. As I was listening there, I was listening to the candidate's his difficulty in reaching out to people. I wouldn't say maybe not difficulty, but like the challenges, like the cost prohibitive challenges. And one of the things that came to my mind was when I was in Canada for 3 years, I studied there before transferring to Holy Apostles. And during my stay there, they had an election there for the next prime minister. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Canadian politics, but basically the leader of the party becomes the prime minister. If there's a dominating party within the House of Parliament, then the leader of the dominating party becomes the prime minister. So, and I had some friends who were very involved in that election, so they're of course watching it, and I kind of by accident, was kind of caught up into it myself. But one of the things though that struck out to me is that the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he basically reached out to the young people in the universities, and he would gather them around there for pizza and whatnot. He would basically garner their votes that way. And the same thing with the Clintons. I'm pretty sure they did the same thing, and they basically garnered the millennial vote. So I was wondering, for the candidate that we have on the air here, do you have this option? Are there schools and universities that you could potentially reach out to?
Yeah, actually, right in my district is Chapman University, and I targeted Facebook. I mean, I'm still experimenting right now, but I targeted a Facebook there, but I have a few contacts. If I could get in front of some classes, if I could even, to Rhonda's point, I don't know about standing on the car. That would be a sight. But doing something out there, handing something out, I need to check and see, what the rules are and all that and everything. One of the difficulties we have with our message is that because, and of course, y'all don't necessarily know my platform. I'm running as an independent, and it is compatible with the Solidarity Party, but I probably focus, I would say it's fair to say, one of the differences is that I focus on how we run government, and I don't mean in terms of subsidiarity so much, but how we run government in terms of what our aims are and things like that a little more. It's more a difference of focus. It's certainly nothing against it. It's not a disagreement. It's just an extra thing. But having said that, there's a lot of things that don't resonate with our young people very well. The idea of being against war is very acceptable to our university students. The idea of being against killing a baby at 9 months gestation, they're not so sure about that. No, because we have to preserve women's rights. And it's become a thing where it's very, very hard to protect life that way among university students. The other thing is they're also looking for, not in the best way necessarily, but they're looking for leadership too. And people tend to admire strength. And when they look, they see the Democratic Party as being very vigorous up until the divisions of late. And so I think they tend to go that way because they're big, they're strong, and they tell them the things they want to hear, that you can go do anything you want and that you don't necessarily have any consequences. That's not working out so well in recent times. But anyway, I'm actually, Rhonda, you're making me think that I need to go over there and at least stand on the sidewalk. Perhaps I'll get a tall box, do something. Maybe I can do something that way. And, John, I think that's a good point because Rhonda was kind of telling me the how. You're kind of telling me the where. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a significant number of students there, so that could be a good thing.
And you know the why.
Yeah, why I've got. It's the how and the where sometimes that stalls me out.
Any more, John?
You're talking about the Orange County. Where are you talking about?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm in Orange County near Disneyland.
Yeah, Disneyland. Okay, anyone who's listening, if they're interested in supporting your campaign, for instance, giving out flyers, how would they reach you?
So right now I've got, my approach is to do what you can quickly and then don't worry about it being perfect at first. So I've got a Facebook page, which is Rushman for Congress 2018. I have a website, which is rushman.org. This is my very old website. And for my initial stuff, I put it rushman.org/Congress 2018 because I'm working on a more elaborate one under rushman.org. But either one's fine. It has contact information. One of the things that's different for me is that I have a direct text number. So somebody can actually text that number from their phone and they will reach me directly. It's not my own personal phone because that would be insane. It's one that if I'm busy, it can just pile up in there and I can go back and answer it. And I think that one of the things that I can do is be very active and personal. You know, normally if you try to contact a candidate, you're talking to some staffer, some marketing person. I've known people that actually did this. You're never talking to the real person. But with me, anybody that contacts me is going to get me, not my person, not my organization. They're going to actually get a human response. And I look forward to the day where I can no longer handle the volume of them.
Okay, so you want to give out that number right now very slowly?
I can promise you it will be very slowly because I don't have it memorized. It's actually on my site. So I'm going to go over there right now and find that, and I will give you the number.
Ed, Rhonda said she has already texted once. And
wow.
She's going to do it again. And I want you to know, Ed, I've never texted anybody. And John, how many times a day do you text?
It depends. Sometimes it's quite a lot, and sometimes it's not at all.
But you see, you're leading the texting charge on this show.
And I guess I should mention that since I work in technology, I am an absolute texting fool. I text, I message, I mail. I've used just about every product there is out there. So the text number coming at you is 714-340-5496.
You better repeat that. You better repeat that. 714-340-5496. Thank you.
I'll give you the email as well. And the email is ed, that is E-D, at rushman.org, rushman.org, O-R-G.
Very good.
In marketing, they talk of customer intimacy, and one of the nice things is by doing this, because I haven't yet published my SWOT analysis, my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. That's something I usually do for anything. But one of the advantages I have is that I'm very personal, I'm very personable, and I'm good at being close to people as opposed to, you know, having layers of bureaucracy around me. I absolutely detest having layers around me. Someday I may have to do that if I'm very successful.
Plus, Ed tells me that he hasn't actually slept in the last 4 years. I have had situations where I really wasn't getting much sleep, that's for sure. Well, let me interject for 1 second here. We've been talking about political parties, and Ed knows, and Rhonda knows, and John will now know that I'm a student of Jacques Maritain, and next year will be the 70th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. And Maritain had a role to play in that. And he also had something to say about political parties on more than one occasion. And in one of his books, The Rights of Man and Natural Law, which was written published in 1943, which must mean that it was written in 1942. Dire days indeed. He has a section on political parties, and his background is pre-World War II France, and the political parties in France had actually been paralyzed by internal fighting and by gutlessness. So in The Rights of Man and Natural Law, he says that the reproaches against political parties are justified given their corruption and paralysis. And he goes on to say, I like this line, but these vices are not essential. So they're not intrinsically bad. And he goes ahead and he says that parties should reflect, and this is a quote, notice an interesting word, a word very familiar to us, but maybe we're surprised that he would use this word in 1942. Parties should reflect the natural diversity. Whoa. The natural diversity of practical conceptions and perspectives existing among the members of the political community. Well, one thing we don't have with, in California, a one-party state, we don't have the Democratic Party even beginning to reflect the conceptions and perspectives of pro-life people, pro-life for the whole of life. Now, even then, because he refused to give up hope, Maritain, 1942, 1943, is writing about a new democracy. And he says, in a new democracy, there would not be the abolishment of political parties, but a new democracy would, quote, be freed from party domination. Be freed from party domination. We could use that. And then, consider when he was writing, he says, a daunting prospect, yes, but, I like this, the problem is not like that of squaring the circle. A lot of people would say, oh, but that's exactly what it's like. And he said, no, it's not as hard as squaring the circle. He thought it was the ongoing work of civic friendship. So somehow or other he managed to get past 1943 to 1948 and play a key role in the formulation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Pope Francis cited specifically in his trip to Myanmar. Worth considering.
I had a question for Mr. Rushman, if I may interject here.
Please.
Do you have a plan for possibly garnering the Hispanic vote in your area?
You know, I'm really glad you asked that question. So about better than 60% of the vote here comes from that group. The winning candidates have always come from that group for quite some time now, and actually our current congressman has just put out a thing today that essentially, I think, pandered to that group and said, you know, that he's asking the FBI to do more to investigate the activities of white people. I thought that was interesting. He was guising into white supremacy, but it was a pretty obvious pandering ploy. However, my approach to this is that most of my friends come from that community, and I am going to purposely ignore the distinction. I'm putting my materials out every place I can. My intention is to put my materials out in both English and Spanish because I honor the heritage here. The fact is we have a lot of people that speak Spanish, and it's common courtesy for me that wherever I am, I try to at least acknowledge the language of the people I'm with, you know, that I have some familiarity. When I worked more with international companies, I would always at least learn to say a few words in the language I was dealing with. So things like hello, thank you, and I'm sorry.
Well chosen.
Yeah. And I found that if I greeted people in their own language, even if I couldn't go any further, there was it warmed things up and helped them to understand that I acknowledged and honored their own tradition. But having said that, I'm trying to ignore it as much as I can because I'm firmly convinced that the Spanish-speaking people, the people that have a Hispanic heritage here, value the same things that I value. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I've done quite a bit of work actually with folks from India, and on more than one occasion, I've talked to people that had no idea what I looked like. They didn't know anything about me except their dealings with me in business. And more than one said, or would ask me, so did you grow up in India? and I thought that was the nicest thing anybody could ever say to me. So the idea is, I think we all have common yearnings. We all have a common sense of what's right, and the people that are the most vocal don't represent the majority. Most of the folks that would be classified as Latino, Hispanic, Spanish-speaking, however we want to put it, most of those folks work. Most of those folks want a more stable country. They want a country where people aren't just yelling and screaming at each other. They want people in Congress that aren't taking money from corporations, that are not just seeking their own wealth and power, people that are really seeking to serve. So that's the long answer. The short answer is, I think they're just like everybody else. I just need to make sure that I'm reaching them and giving them an opportunity to make a choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, John, go ahead.
I want to just say, Jim, I'm thrilled because this is the first time I've gotten to hear from one of the candidates or possible candidates, you know, what your strategy really is going to be, and I'm very impressed.
Well, don't forget Desmond. But Ed does a lot more than Desmond in terms of broad considerations. I think Desmond, being a computer engineer, is very, 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 very focused. But we need everybody, that's for sure. John, you were going to say something more.
Well, I was just saying that I would pose the question to Mr. Rushman because I've taken a recent interest in the potentialities that the Hispanic community offers to this course that I'm taking right now. And it's just basically understanding Hispanic cultural context for the sake of evangelization, but I think there are some aspects that can be taken from there to apply in the field of politics as well. And one of the things is that people, especially Anglo-Americans, don't realize that the Hispanic population right now is the largest minority, but right now it's going to become the majority in the not too distant future. So whatever progress that can be made to bridge the gap between the two communities will pay off the dividends in the long run. So even if you don't win the election in 2018, just making headway with the relations with the Hispanic community can be enormous for the future.
I think that I think it's even more than that. I think that the values that they hold, especially and bear in mind, I grew up in California, so for me, the Spanish-speaking folks are not some other community. They're my group, because I grew up here. And the folks that I know that came up here whose parents were, I'm thinking of one guy I know, my friend Ignacio, his parents, his family came from Mexico, and they were farmers. And some of his family, his uncles and stuff, some of them are still down there and live with his grandfather. I mean, these people had fundamental values of family, values of respect for life. I mean, in every culture, there's always something counter to it as well. But these are folks that are, by their nature, forgive me for saying it, they're conservative. And it's simply been a failure of the Republican Party to value them. And honestly, I use this saying a lot, but the Republican Party's just poked them in the eye so many times they forced them to be Democrats. But it's not their natural habitat.
That's right.
These are folks that have wonderful, wonderful values, and they have all the same. What's funny is everybody is the same everywhere. They have wonderful values. I think that people in this country that have been here a long time have become complacent and moved from liberty to license. But folks that were close to the land, they didn't have that problem because they couldn't afford to be that undisciplined or they would die. And they've had a lot of the folks that have come here from Mexico came with a lot of the same ideas, a lot of the same desires that people have come here from all sorts of countries. They were trying to get away from poverty, yes. from sometimes an inhospitable physical environment. I mean, my goodness, there's areas in Mexico that are awfully hard to live in. My friend from Michoacan, their place was close to a river. That was a good thing. And political and criminal adversity, that they're escaping. They come over here, and life is so much better, and that's what they were seeking. That, to me, makes them Americans. That's the reason why, for the folks that are undocumented, I don't call them undocumented immigrants. I call them undocumented Americans, because they came here with the right intention. They're trying to make a life, and they want the same things that I want. And if that's the case, then they're my brothers and sisters, and they are Americans. And then we just have to fix the problem of the documentation. But if they want to live here with me the same way I want to live, and I don't mean like assimilation in some awful sense. I mean, if they want to live here, raise their children get an education, they want their children to do better than them, then they want the same things I want, and I don't know why I wouldn't stand in solidarity with them. And that applies to anybody from any country that's coming here. Practically nobody's coming here to destroy the country. That's the job that have been here, of the people that have been here for generations. They're the ones that want to destroy the country, not the people that are coming here seeking a kind of salvation, So it's a little bit of a rant, but you know what I mean. And
I think there's an opportunity here for a Chesterton quote. This panel program is called The Open Door. And you've been talking about how people come here for something that's worth having, not to destroy it. And Chesterton said this: the object of opening the mind, as of opening the mouth, is to shut it again on something solid.
That's good.
And we in the Solidarity Party think that we've got something solid. I've always been struck by a line that comes from, he's no longer with us, maybe the greatest of this past generation of Mexican comics, a fellow named Chespirito. And Chespirito said, among other things, "Nunca contaban con mi astucia. Nunca contaban con mi astucia." And the translation would be, they never realized how smart I am. And whenever I say that, I switch it from mi astucia, my astuteness, to nuestra astucia. And I cannot think of a time that I've said that, quoting Chespirito, to a Latino laborer, where the fellow hasn't just broken out laughing.
That's a classic.
Yep. Really extraordinary. Now, we're getting close to the time where we have to wrap things up. We still have 7 minutes. And let me say that we had other things in line or online or on the table for today. And I want to mention just one of them. And I'm going to mention it because it's noteworthy and because I know that Ed's not so keen on this as some other people in the party. And, you can't let a guest go unchallenged. Isn't that right, Ed?
I agree.
All right.
Yeah, I have to. I'm muting so that I don't get you a whole bunch of extra noise, and I'm going to have to head into the office at the top of the hour.
I'm just about to cite Pope Francis, and I'm citing him with regard to the Solidarity Party's commitment to just war requirements. And we've discussed this point maybe at 4 or 5 times over the past several months. And it turns out that this month, on the 10th of November, in an address to participants in the International Symposium, Prospects for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons and for Integral Disarmament. What a mouthful. It happens that, what is it getting to be, 20 days ago, the Pope said, among other things, this is a direct quotation, "Nor can we fail to be genuinely concerned by the catastrophic humanitarian and environmental effects of any employment of nuclear devices if we also take into account the risk of an accidental detonation as a result of error of any kind, the threat of their use as well as their very possession, is to be firmly condemned." Now, if memory serves, the congressional district that Ed is looking at was once upon a time held by a fellow named Bob Dornan. Is that true? I think so.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, Bob Dornan, little known
and
fact,
Bob Dornan loved him. He loved him some nukes, let me tell you.
Yes, at any rate, Bob Dornan was a graduate of a university built on a bluff and maintained on that same premise, namely William Marymount University. And I once invited him to a graduate class in political theory, and he came, and I introduced him because I knew that his position was not that of the students. I introduced him as someone who, much like my father, was too outspoken for almost anyone, which is how my mother described my father to the new pastor who was there for my father's funeral but didn't know my father. At any rate, Bob Dornan liked that. He was called B1 Bob. Now, according to the Holy Father, the very possession of nuclear weapons is to be firmly condemned. That's a whole lot for a whole lot of Americans to adjust to. And I'm not saying that you should lead any charge, but I know you've been a little more cautious than some people in the party. I'm not going to mention our friend Scott Heckman, but this is something that would be a challenge that the party would want to put forward for all politicians who are elected. I can't think of anyone who in public would say the very possession of nuclear weapons is to be firmly condemned. And yet...
okay, well, except you do know one. I agree. And just in the interest of time, let me kind of jump in on that for a moment.
Okay,
I think there's some
3
things...
minutes, but we can go over, so there.
And just, by the way, I'm also going to put one more shameless plug, is remember that my Facebook is Rushman for Congress 2018. If everybody would send around share this podcast recording and help me get likes on there, that's a good thing. Okay,
all right.
On the nuclear weapons, absolutely, I will unequivocally say that all tactical nuclear weapons should be destroyed now, flat out. That's a strong part of my approach. No question whatsoever. Tactical nuclear weapons are ones that are never going to, I mean, God willing, will never be used. Man willing, will never be used. They never have been, and their very possession is exactly to be condemned. And we're the United States. We're not here under the Pope. I personally, if he says anything against cathedra, I accept it because I'm Catholic. But the idea here is he's saying what we all know. These things are too terrible. I'll also say that for things like with North Korea's situation, any retaliatory use of nukes, even if they launch on us, any retaliatory use of nukes, to me, would be immoral. It doesn't matter how many millions are killed here. I cannot justify us using them. It's not us as an aggressor. It's the very fact of being the one that launches it that way. Now, we've put ourselves into this awful puzzle of mutually assured destruction, and us standing against all these other nuclear countries, primarily Russia. Really, China is not really much of a threat. We have not yet signed a policy of non-first use. We should sign that policy. Other countries, including North Korea, have actually signed that, although North Korea has backed away from it. But we should absolutely pledge no first use. There is no reason for us to ever do that. But in terms of MAD, we're going to have to back away from that more slowly, because if we were to disarm, and there's no chance this country will ever do that, I mean, unilaterally, a full unilateral disarmament would invite people who are not so enlightened to use on a first basis. I don't know if they would, but we don't want to tempt our neighbor. It's a little bit like piling up our gold at the front door and in a sense going, you know, I'm not going to defend this, and if somebody steals it, it's our loss, but it's their loss for having been a thief. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we don't want to invite something, but I think that we can do an enormous amount to back away from the mess that we've made. An enormous amount. We can renounce this so totally that there's only the sliver of MAD left, and then we'll be in a better position to work with our neighbors in the world to reduce it to zero one day.
We can go from madness to mere neuroticism. All right,
that's right.
That would be progress in this.
It would be.
Garden of Tears. Ed and John and Rhonda, thank you so much for making the panel go today. Rhonda, could you close with a short prayer?
Well, I want to pray for the success of your campaign. And God bless his courage, and may he make inroads. Amen.
Amen. Thanks again. We're at the end.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.